Hello and welcome to the workbench. Today we're going to have a go at improving the teaking effect on these Hornby, I think they went back to Triang days, LNER teak coaches. They often come with the Flying Scotsman set, and there's millions of them around and they're easy to pick up, and they're a very popular coach, and with good reason. They're a pretty good model. I mean, they actually look quite good, proportionally and everything. You know, given that they're double gauge, they run quite well even though they've got plastic wheels, and they couple up close together due to these ends, these curved ends. So they actually couple up fairly close and go around tight corners. So it's not surprising that they're a very popular coach, and probably hundreds of thousands of them have been sold over the years. But there's numerous videos on the internet about how to teak these, because the teak on the older ones, the old cheaper ones, is not the best. It's not very realistic. I was recently at the Severn Valley Railway in England, and they had a whole rake of these coaches, the real ones, and they were much darker and much more intense. They were very intense in real life. The teak oil and the years of in sunshine really amplifies the wooden nature of the exterior of the coach. Now, about 10 years ago, it became really fashionable to people to teak these, and I did one myself. This is one of my early efforts, and it was just like what most people do, and there's quite a few videos on the internet, and I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying I think I found a better way of doing it. And they would use something like Games Workshop contrast paints, thin down regular acrylic paints, sometimes even oil from a tube and then wiping it off, and also Army Painter speed paints in recent times. Now, it is a big improvement, but I think I can do it better. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to amplify the details, because that was apparent both in the real thing. But you also have to remember that model trains and real trains are not the same thing. And this obsession with absolute accuracy is great if you're that kind of collector, if you want to put it on a shelf or look it up close or admire it in a glass cabinet. But in terms of running on your layout, they're not very practical. And there's two reasons for this. The modern ones tend to be quite delicate. A lot of times they don't go around like the second and third radius curves, or at least third radius curves. And also, they're incredibly expensive. And one fine factor, which came up in a video on Double O Bill's channel the other day, where he repaired, I think it was a Hornby Class 37, an original Triang one, I think, sold by Hornby, that goes back to the 1960s. And one of the top comments on the video was, "I love the look and the feel of the old Hornby models." And I interjected on the video, the reason for this is they have a character, and the character is caused by the chunkiness of it. Now, even though proportionally the model was scaled correctly, there was a chunkiness to the details in terms of how they were, the recess in lines would happen. In various, like, molding, they were very deep. This depth adds tremendous character to a model. They also, using the 3 feet or 1 meter rule, distance convention, they look better from a distance. The features stand out. Very delicately molded modern details, although prototypically accurate, they vanish when they're on the layout going around. But the model, and you can watch on when Double O Bill fixes the locomotive, you can see it, how it, even when it's on the layout, its character comes forth. And that's, to me, is more important in both my model railways rolling stock and in my layout. Is I don't want accuracy, I want character. I want character and I want atmosphere. And so I'm going to try and apply that to these Hornby old LNER teak coaches by teaking them. And how I'm going to do it is, and I've done this before in the past when I modeled N-scale on American boxcars, is I'm going to amplify or deepen the grooves on the underside of the mold lines in order for more of the wash or the contrast paint to go in there and to amplify the shadows on the bottom part rather than the top. And then we're going to do some scraping. Now, and this will create a more three-dimensional depth to them without sacrificing the detail that's already there. Think of it as amplifying the detail that's already there, as well as creating something that looks much more like the real thing in terms of this paint look. Now for this you'll need a couple of things. A regular flathead screwdriver like this. You will need a good quality razor saw, a couple of brushes. They don't have to be the best. It's better if one of them is a bit fluffy like this. Some Q-tips, and the colour I use to do my teak is Citadel Contrast Gorgrunte Fur, a kind of a deep reddish brown. You'll need that, and don't forget you need something to put this in while you're working on it, because I can guarantee you if that's on the table, you make one tip, it will fall over and you'll lose your paint. I use this thing here, which is I got it off a guy in a supermarket. They were selling something that came in this rubber thing, and it was perfect for putting my contrast paints in. So I can guarantee you, you got to either use the Games Workshop holder for these after you give them a good shake, or you find some way of mounting them so they can't easily tip over, because they want to tip over, these little containers, as good as the paint is. And finally, some thinners. I use the Tamiya X20A thinner for acrylic paints, and just a little bit of this. This is quite strong, and that's finally it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my razor saw, okay, and I'm going to start with the long bands underneath the wide windows on this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the razor saw and slowly at first rub it into the groove until I create a channel, gently going deeper and deeper and making slightly deeper pass as I go, and cutting a hole or a ridge or a groove underneath the main one. And if you feel it catching in any way, immediately let your hand come off the razor saw, and that you will start to see a groove develop. Now you don't need much, and then send it sideways like that, okay? You take one of your brushes and brush away the excess. Now I don't know if you can see already, it might not be apparent on this camera. Try to get in focus, but the first groove is already deeper. It's already deeper. Now we have to widen it a little bit. We have to widen the groove a little bit, so in order to do that, this is where the small flathead screwdriver comes in. We go into the hole that we made and we do this, and you find that this actually takes out more. Brush away the excess, and don't remember to go from this side too as well. You know you've got the right hole when you see the colour of the plastic underneath showing through. Now, to my eyes, I can see there's now a significant depth there that wasn't there before. If I turn it sideways under the light, you might see it better. But that's going to gather up all the contrast paint. So let me do the rest of the coach. This side and this side. Now this side is a bit trickier because the windows are smaller. Now invariably, if you're like me, you're going to slip and you're going to get the odd cut like this, scratch like this here, right? It's easy enough to repair. You take one of these disposable nail files and you just gently sand in there until it's gone, and sand the whole thing down. The good thing about these coaches is the plastic underneath the same color as the finish on top. So you do that, you hide it, it's gone. So it's just, these things are amazing for modeling, these disposable cheap nail files. I had another minor slip with the, not as bad, on this side with the razor saw again, once again, with the disposable nail file. Yeah, this side you have to be a little more careful as the lines are less, so just, you don't have the less distance so to go, so just go like this. It's the same thing. Again, if you get the initial one gentle, the razor saw will do the work for the rest of you. Let the blade or the tooth on the razor saw do the work. I don't bother with the door ones, and I don't bother with the verticals, just the main ones underneath the windows on the paneling. And then, like the previous side, I turn it around and do the screwdriver from the opposite side. You'll really see the depth being cut in then. You've already created a very good guide for it by using the razor saw. Now finish both sides. It's much easier to do this with the body on, the whole coach assembled. Otherwise it's tricky. You can you can slip us easier. Now we channeled and cut all the grooves under the horizontal windows, clean off the last of the plastic shavings and so. Give one more examination to see if you've done any cuts. A slight one here, just easy enough to tidy up. I know it's probably not visible on the camera, but they're very apparent, the grooves on the model itself. And yeah, some parts you'll need to use the screwdriver flat like this in order to get rid of the shavings, some of the shavings. You see, it's worth turning around all different angles. I see a slight, this might not have been for me, this might have a scratch that already existed. These coaches are very cheap on the second-hand market, so you're not vandalizing something that's cost 70 euros just off the box. So now we can disassemble the coach and start doing the teaking on here. To disassemble these, there's 4 clear plastic lugs which hold in the glazing. You just push them down with a screwdriver as you gently pull the body off, and on each end you can see that these lugs here, there's 2 on each end. You get them off by pushing one in and then pushing up one side of the coach. You see, like this, it'll come. That's fine. And the same on the other side. Take your time and they'll come out fine. I'm not going to do anything to the interiors of this coach. This is purely an exercise in the teaking. That's a job for another day down the road. So here's the coach. It says inside or 435, and we're going to leave it all intact. And it comes to pieces like this, so you can do the end slide off. Okay, so you can do them separate if you want. It's up to you. Actually, it's better because you can hold it on either end while you're doing the teaking. So get your handy wipes ready and put them to the top there. just have them ready in case you spill or you do something. I put my thinners into a small glass. I've got my brush at the ready. I'm using this size one. I got the Q-tips handy nearby as well, and the Games Workshop paints. I'll give that a good shake. Give our brush a quick clean with the handy wipes. I dip it in the thinners first, shake off the excess, and then I put it on the lid of the paint, and I start going down the sides like this. Now the beauty of, it doesn't matter if you go on the roof, you can wipe it off. The beauty of these paints, these contrast paints, is they use a special formula, same with the Army Painter Speeds paints, to fall into the grooves, and the capillary action causes them to bind up. Now, how Games Workshop does it, and people who do war games paintings, is it tends to gather on the top, but that's an unnatural shadow when you think about it. A natural shadow is on the bottom, and so you see what's happening here. On the end of the tumble home, it's gathering at the bottom. You want it to get at the top, you want it to gather at the bottom, so you take the excess off and allow gravity to pull it into the grooves that you channeled. And so painting down and like this. Now, after you've done your first bit of lettering, you get yourself the Q-tip and you remove it from the lettering part gently, so the number still shines through. Okay, the number and then gently go like this, just to tone them down. Now, that's how they looked when I saw them at the Severn Valley Railway Station. The numbers were not that clear, but as this dries, they will become more clear. Now, I get some more paint, and I start on this one here, and I paint into the groove at first. So the maximum paint gathers in there. Get a little bit more thinner. Don't worry about spilling it on the roof like that. It's the easiest thing to remove with the handy wipes. See, a lot of my engagement with this hobby has been unlearned. You can you see how the groove is really coming out now? Is unlearning what I learned when I was growing up. And a lot had to do with the model train magazines and the pursuit of perfection. I didn't have a spray painter. I didn't have, a spray gun. I didn't have access to all these tools. And I used to find myself being very frustrated because I was often trying to achieve perfection with models that I was seeing in the magazines. And it took me a long time to find out, mainly through watching things like channels on YouTube that had nothing to do with model trains. Well, they were modeling channels, things like aviation modelers, and especially miniatures modelers, that I discovered things like the contrast paint, and I discovered things like 28mm heroic scale. 28mm heroic scale is 28mm figures used in wargaming, but they have deeper ridges cut into them, just like I've done here with my razor saw and screwdriver. Just take the paint off the numbers here. With my razor saw and screwdriver to amplify the shadows. You see, it's happening already. Very simply, I have brought an extra level of character to this model that wasn't there before. Sometimes I will go back and do panels that I think look too light. You see that on the real thing as well. Some of the panels have been replaced over the years and the wood is not as old. Now, and the tonal quality changes as you alter the amount of paint you use, so it becomes much more realistic. I generally like to put the thinner near the top. I generally like to put the thinner near the top because it's lighter up there, and you maximize the quantity of paint for inside the grooves that you cut. So the thicker stuff down here. And then a little bit of thinner on your paintbrush, and then the top part. Now the next thing I do is you've got to do the insides of the windows, because that actually helps hiding the lack of flush glazing. So you just do a bead of thick paint, well, unthinned paint, around the window and door opening windows. It's less pronounced if these are darker. That's an old painting trick I saw in the German Train magazine years ago. Okay, there's one side completed. Even before it's dried and gravity has done its thing, tell me that is not a 10,000% improvement on what was already there. Can you see the paint going into the grooves to amplify them? So what I'm going to do now is let this side dry in the upright position, so capillary action draws the paint down into the grooves and amplifies the shapes. And while that's happening, I can do the ends. The ends I tend to paint with the full untinned paint. So I just go with them like this. These coaches in real life, and as well as the models, are beautiful. I spent the better part of half a day just walking up and down at the ones at the Severn Valley Railway. They were parked in the siding, they weren't running, they were parked in the platform area. And the place was very quiet. That they're naturally tilted downwards, so it'll draw the paint down on these. And they were such classy coaches. The interiors of even the third class, you'd pray for something like that these days, to go take a train like that these days. Just goes to show you that while modern may be safer, modern trains are safer, they're not always better. Depends on how you want to live your life. Do you want perfection or do you want beauty? Well, I tend to prefer. I like safety. It's important that we have it, but the health and safety thing has kind of ruined life in the West for many of us in terms of taking the magic out of it. So I just clean the brush with the handy wipes, which make it easier. If I was changing to a different color, because I got the thinners right here, so I don't have to go and wash it out in the sink. And if I was and leave that there, and come back when this side has dried and gravity has done its thing, and we'll have a look at it. So here we have the first side dried. I've still got to do the second side. And you can see how the paint has gathered into the recesses that I cut, deepening them and amplifying them. Looks very different than the original one I'd done. Here's the one I did years ago. You see the difference? The deep ridges really show up on the lower paneling. I also didn't water down. I used the same paint set, but I didn't water down the paint. I did, but used water. I used the thinner for this one, and look how cleaner the finish is. So just to show you the contrast with a coach that hasn't been done, there we go. You can see that there, look. This is automatically much more realistic. That's what the real one looks like. It's a deep, deep Teak. The numbers are still visible. Look, you can see that. And the lettering is still visible. To the same degree it is on the originals that I saw in the Severn Valley Railway. And I still haven't done the other side. That'll be next. But you can see how it has been worth doing the groove. Just because, here's the two ends, they're not dried. You see what I mean by the gravity pulls it down to the bottom? That's okay on the ends because you kind of want a dirty, you know, a more darker wood at the bottom because oil and everything would have splashed on it. I'll just put these to one side to dry until they're fully dry. So that's what it looks like without the teak effect. And this is what it looks like without the grooves being cut and the teak effect. Thinned down with water. And this is what it looks like with the teak effect. The grooves channeled in and thinned with Tamiya X20A acrylic thinner. Now, this is what the chunkiness I was talking about in regarding the old Hornby models. The deeper cuts in the mold adds character. It adds depth, especially from a distance. They look better. It accentuates natural shadows. We're getting full light here. We're on the layout. It'll look better. I'll show you when it's running later and when it's finished. And I'm very pleased with that. And also, I don't spray it with varnish. There's a natural semi-gloss to these paints, these Games Workshop Contracts paints. I leave them as they are. This is why so many historic war modelers, especially fantasy war modelers, fantasy medieval type war modelers, went for the heroic scale in 28mm. The deeper cuts and the deeper embedding into the model, in the features, made it pop out on the board, on the terrain from a distance. And the same thing here. This adds character, and it's not compromising the look of the model because everything is still there. We've removed nothing. We've just taken where natural light would form and deepened it and given a place where paint can fall into. Now, we have lost the yellow around the outside, the yellow borders around the windows and the framing, but we're going to address that later. So I'm just going to go and do the other side of this. Now, regarding doing the roof as white, I have mixed feelings with that, or doing the roof. This is it with a wash, and I think I like it that way. I think I prefer the wash over painting it grey, because I've actually seen photos of the real one, and even the preserved ones have this cream top on them. And also, I think the cream top is very attractive. Remember now, what do you want? A model that's perfect or a model that is pleasing and attractive? And, you know, considering how much money you have. So, regarding the roof, I think with these ones, I think this might have been a mistake. For me personally, you have your own ideas, but I think I'm going to leave the roof this offset white cream colour. It looks like pure white under the camera light, but in reality, it's not like that. Okay, so that's this one. You can see again the horizontal grooves on the paneling. Here, along the bottom, are now taking the majority of the paint, and then we'll let gravity do the rest and create the tone. So we leave it resting like that for a little. While that was drying, you remember the coach I showed you earlier on that I did years ago and made a mess of? Well, I put some thinner on a handy wipe and rubbed it across it and kind of brought back the model. So I got rid of the heavy paint marks, and this looks fine. I have no problem with this being put in the rake now. Just have to wait for it to dry. The lettering that was all obscured is back, and it looks more antiqued and weathered than the other one, but I'm perfectly happy with this. I think it looks fine. You can see how the paint has fallen into the lines here in the bottom. Now, if you want, this is the reason. You can see the reason why I used the thinner with the Tamiya thinner was because you see the yellow around the windows. It remains. It comes through. Now, you could repaint these if you want, but honestly, I'm not bothered. I think they look fine. And if you look at the real ones in real life, they look fine. So this is the model basically painted. Now there's one other thing I'd like to do at this point, and I want to, these panels above the doors they come out from it, I want to touch them up with a new shade of paint, and I'll use a slightly smaller brush for this, nothing too tiny, something with a tip anyway, and dipping the paint in full. Do a bit more now, just to bring out the panel on the top, just to bring it out a deeper colour. We'll give that a couple of minutes to dry, and then we will reassemble the coach. And here is our completed Teak coach. I think you'll agree it looks 1000% better than what it looked before, and the deep groove lines really add to, when you see that from a distance, they really stand out. Now for the rivet counter, I understand you're in a different world than I am, and I don't disrespect it. I think it's great, there's room for everyone in this hobby, but this is how I do things, and it gives me a lot of joy and satisfaction there. In this shot there, you can really see the depth of the groove lines. So there's only one thing left to do. Let it join its brothers and sisters in the rake and take it for a spin. So there we go. That's the coach finished. I think you'll agree it looks a lot better, and it now joins the rest of the rake, which have all been done. Excuse the poor lighting. There we go, it's better. It'll show up better when it's going around. A word about the locomotive first. This is a Hornby A3 Pacific called Mary Hampton. It's an old model, it's a noisy model, but it's got quite a fine set of wheels. I've got a crew in the cab, and although it runs well, it's very, very noisy, so that will be hauling the rake. It was built for passenger services on the Eastern Main Line in the north, running from London to Scotland, and which is what most of the London and North Eastern Railways territories was, and that's what we're representing here today, an express train on the east coast of England. It also connected into Manchester, I believe, too, as well. So that's the locomotive that's hauling it. Before we get to that, I want to show you, this was the brake coach that was just right behind it. That was a hopeless case here. Now I took most of the paint off using a handy wipe with some thinner on it, and it's saved the coach, and it's all ready to go. So let's take this very attractive rake off for a spin on Arcadia Junction.